The radio crackled with barely controlled fear. "Overwatch, this is Sierra 4. We're surrounded. 50+ hostiles. No way out. We need the transmission cut off," as gunfire erupted through the speaker, the sound of men fighting for their lives in a firefight they couldn't win. Lieutenant Commander Marcus Hayes listened from the operations center, his jaw tight, knowing he was about to lose an 8-man SEAL team to an enemy that had them boxed in perfectly. Then another voice came across the channel, so quiet he almost missed it. Female calm, Overwatch, Shadow 1. "I have eyes on Sierra 4. 53 hostiles confirmed, engaging." Hayes felt his blood run cold. Shadow 1 wasn't supposed to be anywhere near that sector. Shadow 1 was a myth, a legend, a classified asset that most people in naval special warfare didn't believe existed. But the sniper rifle report that followed, distant, suppressed, but unmistakable, made him believe. The first enemy fighter dropped before anyone understood what was happening. Then the second, then the third. And in a compound in northern Syria, where 8 Navy SEALs had been about to die, Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross stepped out of shadows that had concealed her for 6 hours and started eliminating threats with the kind of precision that would become legendary. Before we show you how one sniper changed a massacre into a victory in 12 minutes of shooting that rewrote tactical doctrine, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. Because what you're about to witness isn't just about marksmanship. It's about the moment a SEAL team learned that sometimes salvation comes from the person you never knew was there. The mission had been straightforward, too straightforward, which should have been the first warning. 8 SEALs inserting into a Syrian compound to capture a high-value target who was coordinating attacks across 3 countries. Intelligence said light security, minimal resistance, in and out operation. Intelligence was wrong. The team had been compromised the moment they breached the compound wall. What should have been 5 guards turned into 50 fighters pouring out of buildings they didn't know existed. The SEALs fought their way into a defensive position in a 2-story structure. But they were trapped, surrounded, taking casualties they couldn't afford. What they didn't know, what they couldn't have known, was that 6 hours earlier, a lone figure had infiltrated the compound, through a drainage culvert that intelligence hadn't mapped. Had climbed to a vantage point on the 3rd floor of a half-collapsed building that overlooked the entire complex. Had settled into position with a rifle that most snipers would never be cleared to carry, and had been waiting. Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross, 27 years old, 3 tours with Joint Special Operations Command, classified kill count that exceeded 60 confirmed eliminations. She wasn't supposed to be there. Her mission parameters had been reconnaissance only. Observe the compound, gather intelligence, report back. But Ross had learned years ago that mission parameters changed when lives were at stake. And watching 8 SEALs die because she followed orders wasn't something her conscience would accept. She'd been watching the compound through her scope for 6 hours when the SEALs made their approach, had seen the trap being prepared, the fighters moving into position, the ambush being set. She'd tried to warn them, keyed her radio 3 times in the warning pattern that meant abort mission, but either they hadn't received it or had chosen to proceed anyway. Now they were paying the price. Through her Schmidt and Bender scope, Ross watched the SEALs fighting from their defensive position. She could see muzzle flashes from 8 different weapons. All 8 men still in the fight, but barely. Ammunition would run out soon. Medical supplies would run out sooner. The enemy had them surrounded in a horseshoe formation, pouring fire into the building from 3 directions, preparing for the final assault that would overrun the position. Ross made a decision that would either save 8 lives or end her career. She picked up her radio and transmitted to Overwatch, announcing her presence and her intention to engage. Then she got to work. Her rifle was a heavily modified M110 SAS chambered in 7.62mm, equipped with a suppressor that reduced but didn't eliminate the acoustic signature. She had 200 rounds of match-grade ammunition, a backup pistol she'd never need at these ranges, and years of training that had taught her how to make every shot count. The first target was easy, an enemy fighter directing the assault from behind a low wall, his position offering perfect cover from the SEAL's angles, but completely exposed to Ross's elevated position. She centered the crosshairs on his torso, compensated for the 300 meters range and slight wind from the east, and pressed the trigger. The rifle coughed. The suppressor reduced the report to something that wouldn't immediately give away her position. 300 meters away, the fighter collapsed like someone had cut his strings, dead before he understood he'd been shot. Ross worked the bolt, chambering the next round with mechanical precision. Her breathing was controlled, her heart rate steady at 55 beats per minute. She wasn't nervous, wasn't scared. This was what she did, what she'd trained for through thousands of hours of practice, what made her one of the most effective snipers in Jack. Target 2 was moving between positions, trying to coordinate a flanking maneuver. Ross led him by half a body length, squeezed the trigger, watched him drop. 2 down, 51 remaining. The enemy still didn't know they were being engaged from a position they thought was unoccupied. They were focused on the SEALs, pouring fire into the defensive position, shouting orders, preparing for their assault. Ross used that focus against them. She worked methodically through their leadership structure. Every fighter who was giving orders, every position that was coordinating the attack, every threat that posed the greatest danger to the SEALs. She prioritized machine gun positions. Those could suppress the entire SEAL team. Then RPG carriers, those could destroy the building the SEALs were defending. Then radio operators, those could call for reinforcements. In 3 minutes, she eliminated 9 high-value targets. The enemy still didn't understand what was happening. They saw their leaders falling, their key positions going silent, but in the chaos of a firefight, it took time to recognize a pattern. Ross gave them no time. She transitioned from methodical elimination to rapid engagement. The suppressor kept her position ambiguous. The elevated angle made her fire seem like it was coming from multiple directions. The enemy started to panic, pulling back from their advanced positions, seeking better cover. Their assault momentum breaking. The SEALs recognized the change immediately. Ross could hear them over the radio, confused but professional, taking advantage of the enemy's disorganization to improve their own positions, redistribute ammunition, treat their wounded. Sierra 4, this is Shadow 1, Ross transmitted, her voice calm despite the intensity of the engagement. Your 9 position has 3 machine gun nests. I'm eliminating them now. When they're down, you have a 30-second window to reposition to the northeast corner. Acknowledge. There was a pause. Then a male voice, rough with adrenaline but controlled. Shadow 1, Sierra 4 actual, copy all. Who the hell are you? Someone who doesn't want to watch you die. Stand by for suppression. Ross shifted her aim to the machine gun positions she'd identified. 3 fighters well positioned behind sandbags, putting sustained fire on the SEAL position. They thought they were safe behind their fortifications. They were wrong. Ross put 3 rounds through the sandbags, 7, 62mm penetrators that defeated the improvised protection like it was paper. 3 fighters down in 5 seconds. The machine guns went silent. Sierra 4, you're clear. Move now. She watched through her scope as the SEALs executed a tactical displacement, moving to a better position, while she kept suppressive fire on anyone who tried to track their movement. 2 enemy fighters popped up to engage the moving SEALs. Ross dropped both before they could fire. 15 enemies eliminated, 38 remaining. But the enemy was adapting. They'd figured out that someone was shooting at them from an elevated position, and they were spreading out, making themselves harder targets, using cover more effectively. Some were starting to scan the surrounding buildings, trying to identify Ross's location. She needed to move. Ross broke down her position in 30 seconds, secured her rifle, collected her brass casings, leave no evidence, moved to a secondary position she'd prepared 3 hours earlier. It was 20 meters away, different angle, different line of sight. By the time enemy fighters started putting rounds into her original position, she was already re-established and engaging from the new location. The enemy's confusion multiplied. They thought they had identified her position, but fire was still coming, and now it seemed like it was from a different angle entirely. Some fighters started shooting at shadows, wasting ammunition on empty buildings. Others huddled behind cover, afraid to move, afraid to expose themselves to the unseen threat. Ross exploited their fear. She picked off anyone who showed courage, anyone who tried to rally their forces, anyone who attempted to organize a counterattack. Leadership was systematically eliminated, initiative was punished with immediate death, and the enemy force that had been a coordinated assault element began fragmenting into individuals focused on personal survival. Then things got complicated. A pickup truck with a mounted heavy machine gun came roaring into the compound from the east gate. The .50 caliber gun could tear through the SEAL's defensive position like tissue paper. Ross saw the threat immediately, adjusted her aim, and took the shot that mattered most. The driver's head snapped back as the 7.62mm round found its mark. The technical swerved violently, the dead driver's weight on the steering wheel, sending the vehicle careening into a concrete wall at 40 km/h. The gunner was thrown from the truck bed, landing hard on the ground. He was trying to get up when Ross's second shot put him down permanently, but the crash had drawn attention. Enemy fighters were converging on the wreck technical, and some of them were finally looking in the right direction toward Ross's building, toward the elevated position that had been killing them for the past 6 minutes. Ross saw muzzle flashes from multiple positions, all aimed at her general area. Rounds began impacting the walls around her, punching through the degraded concrete, sending dust and fragments into the air. She was taking fire from at least 8 different shooters, and while none of them had her exact position yet, it was only a matter of time. She made herself a smaller target, repositioning behind a support column, and continued engaging. An enemy fighter was setting up an RPG to fire at her building. Ross put a round through his chest before he could aim. Another fighter was directing the incoming fire, pointing toward her position. Ross eliminated him with a headshot that made the others hesitate. Shadow 1, Sierra 4, you're taking fire. What's your status? Sierra 4, I'm fine. Stay in position, I'm about to make things interesting. Ross had prepared for this contingency. 3 hours earlier during her initial reconnaissance, she'd placed demolition charges in strategic locations around the compound. Not enough to level buildings, but enough to create chaos and confusion at a moment of her choosing. She keyed the remote detonator. 3 explosions erupted simultaneously across the compound: a fuel depot on the western wall, a vehicle storage area near the main gate, and an ammunition cache in the southern building. The combined effect was spectacular: massive fireballs that lit up the pre-dawn darkness. Secondary explosions as stored munitions cooked off, debris raining down across the entire complex. The enemy fighters panicked. Some thought they were under aerial bombardment. Others thought the SEALs had reinforcements. All of them stopped shooting at Ross's position and sought cover from what they thought was a massive assault. Ross used those 10 seconds of chaos to eliminate 6 more targets, fighters who were exposed and confused, easy prey for someone who remained calm and focused. Her rifle spoke with methodical precision. Target acquired, round fired, target down. Next target, 6 shots, 6 kills, bringing her total to 21. The SEALs understood what was happening and began their own offensive push. They emerged from their defensive position with coordinated fire and movement, engaging enemy fighters who were still reeling from the explosions. Ross provided overwatch, eliminating threats that the SEALs couldn't see, calling out positions and directing their advance. Sierra 4, you have 2 hostiles in the second-floor window at your 1. I'm engaging now. Her rifle barked twice. 2 fighters tumbled from the window. Sierra 4, 3 more trying to flank you from the alley on your right. Hold position. Ross shifted her aim, tracked the 3 fighters moving through the narrow alley, timed her shots for when they passed through gaps in cover. 3 quick shots, 3 bodies dropped in the alley. The flanking attempt defeated before it developed. The SEALs pushed harder, clearing buildings, neutralizing resistance, consolidating their position. The enemy force was disintegrating. Some fighters were fleeing toward the compound exits. Others were surrendering. The rest were dying as they tried to maintain a defense that had completely collapsed. But Ross's situational awareness flagged a new threat. 4 enemy fighters were setting up a mortar position on a rooftop 200 meters away. If they got that weapon operational, they could drop indirect fire on the SEAL position with devastating effect. Ross calculated the shot. 200 meters, elevated target, wind gusting from the northeast. Multiple shooters working in coordination. She'd need to eliminate all 4 quickly before they could scatter or return fire. She took a breath, let it out slowly, and entered what snipers called the zone. That mental state where time seemed to slow down, where every variable became clear, where muscle memory and training merged into something approaching supernatural precision. First shot, the spotter who was looking through binoculars and calling adjustments. He dropped without seeing the round that killed him. Second shot, the gunner who was adjusting the mortar elevation. He collapsed across the weapon he'd been setting up. Third shot, the loader who was reaching for another round. He never completed the motion. Fourth shot, the commander, who was finally realizing they were under attack and trying to run. He made it 3 steps before Ross's bullet caught him between the shoulder blades. 4 shooters, 4 shots, 7 seconds. The mortar position was eliminated before it could fire a single round. Sierra 4, mortar threat neutralized. You're clear to advance to the north compound. Shadow 1, how many guns do you have up there? That's at least 30 kills. 1 gun, Sierra 4, just making it count. The SEALs understood what was happening and began to exploit it. They shifted from defensive to aggressive, launching their own counterattacks against disorganized enemy positions, reclaiming ground, establishing fire superiority. Ross coordinated with them over the radio, calling out targets, identifying threats they couldn't see, directing their movements with the kind of tactical awareness that only came from elevated observation and years of experience. Sierra 4, you have 4 hostiles trying to flank your west position. 2 behind the blue truck, 2 in the doorway at your 10. I'm engaging the truck position now. Her rifle spoke twice. 2 bodies dropped behind the truck. The SEALs engaged the doorway position with grenades and automatic fire, eliminating that threat. 28 enemies down, 25 remaining, but ammunition was becoming a concern. Ross had fired 85 rounds, had 115 remaining. She needed to be more selective, more conservative. Every shot had to count because the SEALs needed her fire support to maintain their momentum. She shifted tactics, focusing on targets that posed imminent danger to the SEALs rather than targets of opportunity. An RPG gunner lining up a shot on the SEAL position, eliminated before he could fire. A group of fighters preparing to storm the building. 3 quick shots that killed the leaders and broke the assault. A sniper on a distant rooftop targeting the SEALs. 1 round at 400 meters that ended that threat permanently. The enemy sniper had been good, concealed position, good angle, patient. But Ross was better. She had spotted him from his muzzle signature when he'd fired at one of the SEALs, had calculated his position from the angle of his shot, had waited for him to settle back into his scope for his next shot. When he did, when his silhouette appeared in the scope for just a moment, Ross fired. The round crossed 400 meters in under a second, found the enemy sniper's head, and eliminated someone who might have killed multiple SEALs if Ross hadn't been there. The SEALs were pushing now, clearing buildings, consolidating positions, turning a defensive disaster into an offensive success. But the enemy still had numbers, still had fighters willing to die, and the battle was far from over. Then Ross saw him, the high-value target, the man this mission had been about, trying to escape through a back exit with 4 bodyguards. He was abandoning his fighters, leaving them to die while he fled to safety. Ross made a decision. She could keep supporting the SEALs or she could complete their original mission objective. She chose both. Sierra 4 primary target is exiling through the north compound exit with 4 security. I'm engaging. You have 12 hostiles remaining in the main compound. Can you handle them? Shadow 1 Sierra 4, we've got it. Take the shot. Ross shifted her aim to the fleeing group. Range 450 meters, targets moving at speed, weaving between obstacles, professional security detail that knew how to protect a principal. This wouldn't be easy. She started with the bodyguards. They were threats, and they were blocking her shot at the primary target. The first one went down cleanly, a center mass shot that dropped him instantly. The others reacted professionally, forming a protective shield around their principal, moving faster, making themselves harder targets. Ross adjusted, leading her targets, timing her shots to when their movement patterns exposed vulnerabilities. Second bodyguard down, caught him during a turn when his body armor didn't cover his side. Third bodyguard down, headshot when he looked back to check their 6. The fourth one was exceptional, using cover effectively, staying close to the principal, making a clean shot nearly impossible. So, Ross shot him through the vehicle he was hiding behind. The 7. 62mm round punched through the car door, through the bodyguard's torso, through his spine, and into the engine block behind him. He collapsed, blood spreading across the dusty ground, leaving the high V-value target completely exposed and alone. The man realized his situation and ran, sprinted for the compound wall with the kind of terror that came from knowing death was stalking him. He was fast, probably had been a fighter himself before becoming a coordinator, and he moved with the kind of evasive patterns that suggested training. Ross tracked him through her scope, compensating for his speed and erratic movement, waiting for the moment when his pattern became predictable. It came when he approached the wall. He had to commit to his path, had to stop weaving, had to focus on the climb. Ross led him by 2 body lengths, exhaled slowly and squeezed the trigger with the kind of gentle pressure that came from years of training. The round flew true, caught the high-value target in the upper spine and dropped him 15 feet from the wall he'd been trying to climb. The mission objective completed by someone who wasn't even supposed to be on the mission. Sierra 4 primary target is down. Confirm kill from your position when able. Shadow 1, moving to confirm now. And seriously, best shooting I've ever seen. Ross smiled slightly, but kept scanning for threats. The battle wasn't over until every hostile was neutralized or had fled. She continued to provide overwatch, while the SEALs cleared the remaining fighters, eliminating 3 more enemy combatants, who tried to ambush the team during their clearing operations, each one dropping before they could fire at the SEALs who'd never seen them. One fighter had been particularly dangerous. Concealed in a destroyed vehicle with a clear angle on the seal point man, finger on the trigger of an RPG that would have killed at least 2 Americans. Ross saw him a half-second before he fired, put a round through the tiny gap between his cover and his position, and watched him slump forward, the RPG falling unfired from dead hands. 35 enemies killed, 18 fled into the Syrian countryside where they'd spend the rest of their lives knowing that an American sniper had destroyed their entire force. 8 Navy SEALs survived what should have been a massacre. When the compound was finally secure, when the last hostile had either died or retreated, Ross broke down her position and prepared to exfiltrate. She'd been in position for nearly 7 hours, had engaged in one of the most intense sniper operations in recent memory, and had saved 8 lives while completing a high-value target elimination that would disrupt enemy operations for months. She was packing her equipment when her radio crackled. Shadow 1, Sierra 4 actual, we'd like to meet our guardian angel. What's your position? Ross hesitated. She'd been trained to avoid direct contact with the unit she supported, to remain in the shadows, to complete her mission without recognition or acknowledgement. But something about the way the SEAL team leader had said it, the genuine gratitude in his voice, made her reconsider. Sierra 4, I'm moving to the compound north wall. 5 minutes. She descended from her hide position, moving through the compound with the kind of tactical awareness that kept her alive through 3 combat deployments. Even with the enemy defeated, training dictated caution. She cleared corners, checked for stragglers, kept her rifle ready, even though the probability of contact was minimal. The SEALs were waiting at the north wall when she arrived. 8 men, dirt-covered, blood-stained, exhausted, but alive. They looked at her with expressions that ranged from gratitude to disbelief. Ross was 5 feet 6 inches, maybe 130 lb, young enough to be underestimated by people who didn't know better. She was carrying a rifle that weighed nearly 20 lb, with ammunition and optics, wearing tactical gear that added another 30 lb, and she didn't look like she'd just fought a battle that had left 35 enemy fighters dead. The team leader stepped forward. He was mid-30s, weathered with the kind of eyes that came from seeing too much combat. Lieutenant Commander Hayes, SEAL Team 7. That was the most impressive shooting I've ever witnessed. Ross slung a rifle and extended her hand. Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross, JSOC attached. Glad I could help. Hayes shook her hand firmly. Help? You saved our lives. We were about to be overrun. I had 8 men about to die and no way to save them. Then you? He gestured at the compound, at the bodies scattered throughout, at the evidence of precision shooting that had turned impossible odds into a tactical victory. Where the hell did you come from? I've been here for 6 hours, Ross replied simply. Reconnaissance mission. When I saw you insert, I tried to warn you off. The compound was more heavily defended than intelligence indicated. We got no warning, Hayes said, frowning. Radio interference, probably. By the time I realized you weren't receiving, you'd already committed. Ross shrugged. At that point, mission parameters changed. I could watch you die or I could engage. Chose to engage. One of the other SEALs, a younger operator with a Texas accent, spoke up. Ma'am, I counted at least 35 hostile kills in 12 minutes from concealment while coordinating our movements and completing the primary mission objective. That's not just help, that's goddamn miraculous. Ross didn't respond to that. Didn't know how to respond to praise that seemed excessive, even if it was technically accurate. She'd done what needed doing, used skills that had been refined through years of training, and had achieved results that training made possible. Your team performed well under pressure, she said instead. Maintained discipline. Took advantage of opportunities I created. Good tactical awareness despite being outnumbered and outgunned. Hayes smiled slightly. Is that your way of saying we're not completely incompetent? That's my way of saying you're SEALs. I'd expect nothing less. Ross checked her watch. Extraction window opens in 20 minutes. We should consolidate and move to the LZ. Agreed. Hayes turned to his team. Gear up. We're moving in 10. During those 10 minutes, while the SEALs prepared to move, Ross provided security and answered questions about who she was and why she'd been in the compound. She was careful about what she revealed. Her JSOC affiliation was acknowledged. Her mission parameters were classified. Her shooting skills were obviously demonstrated, but not explained in detail. What she couldn't tell them was that she'd been specifically chosen for this reconnaissance mission because analysts suspected the compound was more dangerous than standard intelligence suggested. That her presence had been a calculated risk assessment by commanders who thought the SEALs might need backup, but couldn't officially assign it. that she'd been given latitude to engage if circumstances required it, even though official orders said reconnaissance only. Sometimes military operations existed in gray areas where written orders and practical necessity didn't align. Ross had learned to operate in those gray areas to make decisions that higher command couldn't officially authorize, but wouldn't punish if they succeeded. Today had succeeded. 8 SEALs alive, high-value target eliminated, enemy force destroyed. Mission accomplished by someone who officially wasn't even there. The extraction went smoothly. Helicopters picked them up from a pre-decided landing zone, flew them back to the forward operating base where debriefs and medical care waited. Ross separated from the SEALs once they landed, heading to different areas for different reporting chains. JSO assets didn't debrief with regular SEAL teams, even when they'd saved those teams' lives. But before she disappeared into the classified side of the base, Hayes caught her. "Ross, Amaya, thank you. Seriously, we'd all be dead without you." "You would have found a way," Ross replied, though they both knew that wasn't true. SEALs always do. "Not this time," Hayes met her eyes. "This time we needed a guardian angel we didn't know we had. I'm putting you in for a combination." "Please don't," Ross said quickly. "I was never here. This mission never happened." "You know how Jaycock works." Hayes studied her for a moment. "Then let me say off the record that you're the kind of operator we all hope is out there watching our backs, the kind that makes impossible missions survivable, the kind that reminds us why we do this." Ross didn't know how to respond to that either, so she just nodded, accepted the sentiment, and walked away into the shadows that were her natural environment. The after-action reports were carefully worded. 8-man SEAL team engaged superior enemy force in compound operation. Enemy force defeated through superior tactics and marksmanship. High-value target eliminated. 0 friendly casualties, technical details classified, contributing personnel classified. But within naval special warfare, the story spread about the SEAL team that had been surrounded, outnumbered minutes from being overrun. About the voice that came over the radio, female, calm, promising salvation. About the shooting that followed, precision fire that eliminated 35 enemies in 12 minutes. About the operator they called Shadow 1, who appeared from nowhere and disappeared back into nowhere after saving 8 lives. Some said it was exaggerated. Some said it couldn't be real. No single sniper could achieve that kill count that quickly. Some said it was a team effort that got attributed to one person in the retelling. But the 8 SEALs who'd been there knew the truth. They'd seen the evidence. 35 bodies dropped with the kind of precision that only came from world-class marksmanship. They'd coordinated with her over the radio, heard her calm voice directing their movements. They'd met her afterward, seen the small woman with the big rifle who'd accomplished what seemed impossible. And they knew that somewhere in the JSOC machinery there were operators like Amaya Ross, who operated in the shadows, who took missions that didn't officially exist, who saved lives without seeking recognition or reward. Lieutenant Commander Hayes put her in for accommodation anyway, knowing it would be classified, and she'd never be able to acknowledge it publicly. The citation was brief and understated, as all classified commendations were, but it noted that on a specific date in a specific location, a JAC asset had engaged superior enemy forces, eliminated 35 hostile combatants, completed a high-value target mission, and saved 8 American lives through exceptional skill and courage under fire. Amaya Ross never saw that citation, never knew it existed. She was already deployed on her next mission in another country, conducting another operation that officially didn't happen, operating in the shadows that concealed America's most effective warriors. But on the wall of Lieutenant Commander Hayes' office, there was a photograph, 8 SEALs standing at the north wall of a Syrian compound, and one small woman holding a rifle almost as long as she was tall. No names, no location, no date. Just a reminder that sometimes when SEALs whispered that they were surrounded, salvation came from someone they never knew was there. The wolf doesn't announce itself to the sheep. It watches from the shadows, waits for the moment when its capabilities are needed, and strikes with precision that turns impossible odds into inevitable victory. Amaya Ross was that wolf, the silent guardian, the hidden protector, the sniper who emerged from shadows to change everything. And somewhere in Syria, 35 enemy fighters had learned that lesson the hard way in the last moments before precision shooting ended their ability to threaten anyone ever again. 8 Navy SEALs survived that day because someone they didn't know was there had decided their lives mattered more than following orders that said reconnaissance only. That was the job. That was the calling. That was what operators like Ross did. When missions went sideways and lives hung in the balance, they emerged from the shadows. They changed everything. Then they disappeared back into the darkness, ready for the next time someone needed salvation they didn't know existed. Every single time, without recognition, without fanfare, with nothing but the satisfaction of knowing that somewhere 8 warriors were alive because one person had refused to let them die. That was enough. That was everything. That was the silent promise every operator like Ross made when they accepted missions that didn't officially exist. We're watching, we're ready, and when you need us most, we'll be there. Even if you never know our names, especially if you never know our names, because the most effective operators are the ones you never hear about until the moment their skills become the difference between survival and catastrophe. Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross, Shadow 1, the Guardian Angel. 8 SEALs never knew they had until the moment she saved their lives and changed everything. 3 months later, in a different desert, on a different mission, Ross found herself in another impossible position. This time, it was a Ranger platoon pinned down by a force 3 times their size. This time she had 400 meters of open ground to cross under fire. This time, the odds were even worse. She crossed that ground anyway, made it to an overwatch position that shouldn't have been accessible, and set up her rifle while rounds impacted around her position. And when she opened fire, 23 enemy fighters learned what the 35 in Syria had learned. That somewhere in the chaos of modern warfare, there was a sniper who didn't accept impossible odds as an excuse to let Americans die. The Rangers never learned her name, never saw her face, just heard that calm voice over the radio saying, "I have you," and watched their enemies fall with mechanical precision until extraction arrived and pulled them out of what should have been their graves. Shadow 1, the myth that kept proving itself real. The Guardian Angel that JSO deployed when missions went sideways and conventional solutions weren't enough. Amaya Ross would operate for another 4 years before retiring from active duty. 73 confirmed kills across 5 combat deployments, 3 silver stars that remained classified, 2 bronze stars with valor devices that she could never publicly acknowledge, and 1 Medal of Honor nomination that was buried so deep in classified channels that it might never see daylight. But numbers didn't capture what she represented. She was the promise that special operations made to its warriors. That when you're alone, when you're surrounded, when death is certain and hope is gone, someone is watching, someone is waiting, someone will emerge from the shadows to change everything. That promise kept operators pushing into danger zones they'd otherwise avoid. That promise gave them courage to take missions where support seemed impossible. That promise was embodied in a 5 feet 6 inches woman who could shoot like a force of nature and who refused to let good people die when she had rounds remaining and targets to eliminate. Staff Sergeant Amaya Ross, Shadow 1, the sniper in the shadows who changed everything. Still watching, still ready, still refusing to let warriors die alone. Always. Thanks for watching. Every woman has a story worth telling.